All right, well, I'm here today with Steve Farnsworth, better known as Steveology. He's the guy that gets stopped in the airport and people say, hey, wait a minute, aren't you Steveology? And he says, maybe, what do you want? No, he says yes. So Steve's an Uber blogger, Uber social media maven. And so I thought my readers would be really interested in sort of figuring out how you got there, what your story is, and then maybe any tips you might have for other people that aspire to be as influential as you are. I was really impressed, Steve, I must say, by Forbes naming you one of the, I think actually the #1 most impactful PR executive with the most active Twitter followers. I'm just curious, how do you keep, because I wrote an article actually a year or so ago about how all these celebrities have a bunch of fake followers. How do you curate your Twitter followers and keep them engaged, active, and weed out all the fake ones?
Well, part of the reason, I mean, mostly it's just not buying followers, which aren't followers at all. It's
not
robots. Yeah, and kind of a follow, dump and pump kind of thing. There's a lot of bots out there. So if you have that kind of strategy, you're not going to have a very active group. And the other thing I do is I'll go through once in a while, and people who become inactive or aren't there, I'll take them off. It lowers my number, but I don't care. I'd rather have a more of an active group. So
right.
It's just,
do you use a tool? Do you use a tool for that, or how do you do that?
I actually have because of the number of followers I have, I can't use a lot of unfollow tools. So a couple times a year, I launch a thing called Tweet Adder, and it has this unfollow feature, and I can actually find out all the people who aren't following me or who haven't been active in a period of time, and if they're dead weight, and I just kind of start unfollowing them, and I do that once, maybe twice a year, and because otherwise it gets too unmanageable. Because a lot of people abandon their accounts or leave. So if I do a couple times a year, it tends to be a little more manageable. It just takes me a few days to go through and drop all the dead weight and then start kind of clean.
Right. Well, so I teach at UCSB, and I would love to share some of these tips with my students. So if I were a 22-year-old coming out of college, and I want to get my clout score up there, I want to become an influencer over time, what tips would you give a young person to become more influential in the social media area?
I think that, how I actually got kind of into social media, my background was in direct marketing, lead gen, PR, corp comm, and what I really came to, and how I kind of got into socials, I was using social just personally because I really loved the tools. I loved, from between YouTube and social bookmarking sites were kind of the big thing at the time, Reddit, which is still going super strong.
Yep.
And so I was just using these tools, and Twitter was one of those things where I tried a couple times and I couldn't really quite see the point of it. At the same time, and we're probably talking about 7 or 8 or 9, kind of in this period, we start seeing a lot more ability to have communities, active communities, which are more robust than the old bulletin board type communities. Right. And these also common platforms for them too, like Twitter or Facebook. And as a marketer, I was always into creating content as a way to communicate, because if you can provide good information, you have a chance to be in front of people and have them read you. And when you provide good information, you have a chance to set the to outline the criteria, the framework, and how your company or product's viewed. And I always felt that. So I got very excited about this ability to have more direct conversations with an audience. And so I started sharing as digital really took over our lives more in terms of being pervasive in our online activities and the way we buy products, the way we share information products, and the ability to share our own story from a company perspective. I started sharing stories on Twitter about that. And so it was just it was something I felt passionate about, something I read a lot about, and I would just share this content. That was kind of, and my Twitter thing just kind of hit a nerve because of the articles that I was sharing. So I didn't do anything. I didn't set out to have a big following or anything like that. I set out to pursue what I found really interesting, share what I found interesting that I read and I really liked. And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. Put things out there that create a conversation. And then at the same time, is also go to real events and talk to people who are talking at these events, wherever I could. Even just locally, there tends to be things you can go to and interact with. And so between meeting people in real life, getting involved with local groups and having that real life thing, and then online finding things, if you're into rescue dogs. If that's your thing, get into that. Share that kind of stuff. Be passionate about that. Connect with others who are like-minded. You don't need, I think we should all have mentors. I don't think we should go and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Then what we do is we go find people we think are interesting. They don't have to be well-connected. They don't have to be anything. They have to be interesting and challenge you. And you start surrounding yourself with smart people. You're going to start meeting other people who will gravitate towards you if you keep those conversations. And so if you want to be an influencer, find people who share your passion on that topic, connect with them in real life the best you can, and then online.
Yep.
And it really is that simple and that hard, because it means it's not one thing you can do. You can't sit down and turn something on and 10 minutes a day and be a rock star. But you sit down and you spend a half hour a day like connecting with people that you really like, reading the bloggers in your area that you really like, connecting with people in the real world who are passionate about it. And you do that I spend easily an hour or so a day just doing my non-cash producing activities around social. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's what it took me to get where I am. There's an outgrowth of what I was already excited by. No silver bullets, nothing exciting. It's just really being passionate, connecting with people that you enjoy talking with. And keep doing it daily.
Exactly. I was just going to say, one thing that I know you do quite well is you're very consistent. You're consistent in two ways. You're consistent in the quality. You're not talking about the sunset and cute kittens and stuff like that. So you're on point, right, to your audience it's about marketing, it's about online marketing, it's about PR, it's all stuff that's relevant. And you're also not episodic in your, and I'm not good at this. Like I tend to be more an episodic tweeter. Like I'll tweet 3 or 4 things and then I'll get busy and I'm off to something else. But you really manage your Twitter flow very, very effectively, where it's not a blast and then I don't hear from you forever. You're very consistent in the way you lay that out. So clearly you're thoughtful about it and you spend a lot of time working on that. The other thing I really liked about what you just said was in real life, we get so comfortable emailing. And I'm terrible like this. I email people. I should pick up the phone. My wife says, why don't you just call that person? And I'll just email them because it's faster and easier and I just get it done. And that's fine to a point, but especially when you're trying to reconnect with people that maybe you don't have a relationship with. I think you're absolutely right. This idea of mentors, they're not always the people above you, right? They're not always the person with the job title a little bit higher than yours. It might be this person way over here that's not even really a tech person, but they have wisdom, they have experience, and you should tap into that. So again, as a young person, I would say look for people that are sort of in a place that you want to be at some point, whether it's a place in your career or maybe just at the point in their life, and start reaching out to those people. And most people are flattered by that. Most people appreciate when you say, hey, I'd like to learn from you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, and you're so right. All the business, it's really funny, between all the blogging and the Twitter stuff that I do, none of my business comes from that.
Right.
Literally none of it. And my business comes from meeting people in real life. Now, when they go look at me and they go, oh, here's this guy, they see a blog and they go, oh, the guy seems to know what he's talking about. And he seems to be kind of walking his talk. That helps me. Social proof. Sure. It's there. So that's valuable. But none of my business, and this is, it all comes from meeting people, having conversations with them, getting into ideas. I just find, I don't go to trade shows because I'm looking for business. I go to trade shows because I find it interesting, and I go to the workshops that I find interesting. That part of my passion. And you meet other like-minded people. That sounds so cliche, but that's really where it comes from. I go and I talk to people, and I use my blog as an opportunity to meet really interesting folk and share ideas and have conversations that you can't have at cocktail parties normally, because people go, oh, that's really not interesting, and the blog allows me to explore things that I find personally engaging and fascinating and educational.
I think that's another good tip for people that maybe they want to start blogging. It's not only being consistent and being on point, but it is really finding something that you're intellectually curious about. I know for me, it's about startups, it's about entrepreneurs, it's about what makes us tick. It's like, what are our foibles, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses? All of that is interesting to me. So when I write a blog entry, I don't sit down and go, oh crap, I got to write about this. Usually I'm like, oh, I just heard about this and somebody mentioned that and that fits in with what I was thinking about last week, and then I sit down and write it. I do write for the Wall Street Journal now, and that's the first time I've written to an editorial calendar, and that has its own challenges, and it's actually a good exercise for a writer, and I would recommend after people have been blogging for a little while to do that. But in the early stages, I think that's a mistake. I don't think writing to an editorial calendar in the early stages is going to work for most people, and I think that's a mistake companies make.
Yeah.
They'll come up with, oh, it's Easter, it's Father's Day, it's whatever the holiday of the week is, and they'll try to write some cheesy ass blog entry about that. Write about what you are passionate about as a company. Like, write about what your customers are passionate about. Get personal, which is something else I had to work on. Like, I would never write anything personal in my blog. I did it under a pseudonym for like 2.5 years. I didn't even say what my name was. And again, that was probably a good idea because those entries kind of sucked and people couldn't find them, and I can hide them now. So I failed in the small. But once you get your voice, and I think once you start to get a following, then you have to make that decision. You're very good at that, getting personal appropriately, talking about things that turn you on or turn you off, and not being too antiseptic or too standoffish.
Yeah, and that's something I have to fight because that's not my natural thing. But I know that people want to hear that kind of stuff, so I really do work at trying that. It's interesting. I did. One of the things that you do really well, and I think that you're actually a really good model for that whole walk and your talk, your blog, you really tried really hard to kind of peel back the Band-Aid on entrepreneurship, try to kind of warts and all, here's what's going on, here's what I think. And I got to believe that played no small part in you getting your gig with the Wall Street Journal. Is that true?
Well, it might have. I know they reached out to me because I had written a couple of things for Forbes, and they liked the analogies that I use, because I think in terms of analogies. I don't consider myself an academician or a brilliant person. I've got to find a very simple, real-world analogy, and then I can make the mental leap off of that. And so there was a couple baseball analogies that I used and things like that, and they found that interesting, like I do. But again, I get excited when I find those analogies, when I make those connections. I don't sit down and go, oh crap, I got to write about baseball. It's like, I think young people need to figure out what is it that excites them. If it's rap music, if it's whatever, fill in the blank. Incorporate that passion into your writing or into your message. And I think it's not going to work for everybody, and certainly my analogies don't work for everybody. But I think it's a crisper, maybe more creative and fun, and entertaining way to communicate, as opposed to just you've read those blog entries where you're like, you get in the first 2 sentences and you're like, I'm done, I can't do this. So it's something that's intriguing, entertaining, but still, it's not all cotton candy, right? There's something there. There's a message there. There's some content. So it's a balance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for young people, it's, a blog, you don't have to blog forever. But for a young person, you can go get a free blog.
Yeah.
And if you go out and you really, you go and meet people and ask the interesting questions of people you want to really learn from. Most people will spend time. If you already have a blog and you have a couple posts and see what you do, it's a great opportunity to go and pick their brains, learn something, and as a process, show your understanding too. And I think it's great when young people see that opportunity. I wish more people really understood the power of fundamentally informational interviewing in the age of blogs, and because it's so powerful. And you don't have to do it forever. You can just do it until you get that job you need or whatever. I think it's a worthwhile thing to hold on to ongoing. But
I do too. Well, and you're developing or refining a great skill, which is communicating. And you really can't get too good at that, right? Especially in business.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Appreciate you working me in amongst all the other things you got going on. Get back on Twitter. I want to see some more tweets. All right, Steve. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.